to close your eyes and bow your head, okay? So, Father God, we come to God asking for wisdom, God. You said in your word that if any man lack wisdom, we should ask you for it because you'll give it liberally, God. So, God, we pray for wisdom as to the ways, as to the strategies, how to take Jamaica forward into a new era of technological innovation, Father God. We pray, Father God, that you will superintend this entire process, that it will be done in order, that there will be a lot of creativity, God, that at the end of the day, what will be discussed here will reverberate and will impact this nation for good. Amen.
Thank you for that.
Amen.
As we start now, I'm going to invite Ms. Joaquin Murray, the Chief Technical Director of the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, to bring the message of Minister the Honourable Favour Williams to the meeting. Thank you, Joaquin.
Good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, as you would have heard, the Honourable Favour Williams, Minister of Science, Energy and Technology, unfortunately, is unable to participate in this morning's virtual public consultation on the National Science, Technology and Innovation Green Paper. It is therefore my pleasure to deliver her remarks. Professor Errol Morrison, Director General, National Commission on Science and Technology, Professor Emeritus Ishenkumba Kawe, University of the West Indies, Ms. Sandra Buchanan, Principal Director of the Policy Planning, Development and Evaluation Division of the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, Dr. Delahaye Mackenzie, Science Program Manager, MSET, Ms. Claire Bernard, Director, Sustainable Development and Regional Planning from the Planning Institute of Jamaica, Dr. Judith Mendez, Director of Research, and Ms. Patricia Lewin, Senior Technology Officer, both of the National Commission on Science and Technology, Mr. Kevin Hopkins, Rapporteur, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, a pleasant good morning. My commendations to the National Commission on Science and Technology, the Policy Planning, Development and Evaluation Division of the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, and our valuable stakeholders from the public and private sectors who have collaborated and worked assiduously to get the science, technology, and innovation policy to this stage. As you're aware, the draft Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy was approved as a green paper by Cabinet and tabled in the Parliament on November 12, 2019. The policy is a part of a wider movement to strengthen our policy framework and the popularization of science among our people. It seeks to facilitate the development of ST&I as major aspects of our culture and our economy, to promote the increased production of value-added products, to increase the number of local patents being registered, and to promote the development of a local innovation and science-driven sector that can be expected to employ a significant number of persons. Ladies and gentlemen, the ST&I policy is a vital part of our National Development Vision 2030, which seeks to create a technology-enabled society. A crucial part of this vision is integrating science and technology into all aspects of national development, increasing science and technology education in our educational institutions, and creating and introducing a national policy to promote science and technology. The time has therefore come, and is long overdue, for us to become a society where all our people embrace and use science and technology to create sustainable solutions to not only our local problems, but regional and global problems. Ladies and gentlemen, science, technology, and innovation are key drivers for the economic growth and development of our country and society, as it undergirds every facet of life. The potential for business, entrepreneurship, social and economic development, food security, healthcare, and a myriad of other activities are magnified with ST&I. With the future being shaped and reshaped by science, technology, and innovation, it behoves us to ensure that Jamaica is on the cutting edge of this new age, and this policy is a bold step towards the future. As stated by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, the experience of successful developing countries shows that science, technology, and innovation policies that are well integrated into national development strategies and combined with the institutional and organizational changes can help raise productivity, improve firm competitiveness, support faster growth, and create jobs. Ladies and gentlemen, science, technology, and innovation holds tremendous potential for our country. Our people must become a part of the scientific revolution, and it is our vision to create a nation and a people that is excited by and values science. It is evident that the application of science, technology, and innovation has fundamentally changed the way we interpret and experience the world. Science, technology, and innovation are at the core of all development and advancement. Therefore, we want the development of this policy to be as inclusive as possible. I encourage those of you participating in this public consultation and every other Jamaican here and in the diaspora to share their ideas, voice their concerns, and play their part in ensuring that Jamaica has a comprehensive and robust science, technology, and innovation policy. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, that while the ministry and its agencies, as well as members of academia, have been driving the development of this policy, once approved by the Parliament, it becomes our policy to implement. And so I invite your full attention and participation and look forward to an engaging and fruitful session. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing those remarks, Joaquin. Next, we have Professor Errol Morrison, the Director General of the NCST, and he has very brief remarks to make.
Just a couple of minutes, because as Minister is saying, this is the opportunity to get a wide input. Because when we look at driving policy or the thinking of STNI nationwide, it goes back to the 80s, when Professor the Honorable Gerald Layla, put together for Cabinet his thoughts on how STNI should be developed, and did quite a bit of extensive search as to what was happening across the island, and put together quite an impressive report for Cabinet. And this was further researched a few years later and added to by Dr. Conrad Douglas, who is affiliated to the NCST at this time. And then by the 90s, Dr. Arnaldo Ventura again put together a concept as to the direction of STNI and how the nation should be responding to it. But the shortcomings in all of these have been the lack of a full comprehensive consultation process to give this the kind of buy-in where, as the minister has said, government will now enact this. And this is where I think we are. And this process started from 2015, when at the board of the commissioners for the National Science and Technology, Professor Kawa, then at UWI, was mandated to lead this whole process. And the years have taken us through several iterations, meetings facilitated by the PIOJ and with various thematic groups, with students, with the youth, with various sectors. So we have come to this at a point where just about a year ago, collating all of what we have been consulting and pulling together, the subcommittee of Cabinet listened to our early presentation put forward by Ms. Sandra Buchanan, supported by the NCST's team and so on. And they said to us, Okay, what is the priority? 2 days ago, we had a think tank with the JIS. And one of the questions at the end of it was, how does this science, technology, and innovation policy fit in with the UN's Millennium Goals? And my response was, look, the goals are well known, in terms of reduction of poverty, protection of the vulnerable, the women, the aged, the children, removal of a number of health adverse situations. All of these, whilst in a broad context, what will we do on the ground? What is Jamaica's priority, the front burner? And the cabinet subcommittee has put together those priorities which you would have been seeing in the document and which has been, reiterated over and over. So I think where we are at this point is to ensure that we have not left out anything or anybody or any concepts, and where we can embrace the thinking and to tweak this sort of basic document to ensure that we have our perspectives involved. This is where we are at. And I'm really very pleased, that we are able to convene a cross-sectional group as this, academia, private sector, government sector, and trying to put this together. As I said to Professor Collinger just before we began, COVID has certainly taught us, the role of technology in communication. And now that we are meeting in this way, these meetings have gone on for 5 hours and more. I doubt that Ms. Lewin and her team has gotten that kind of, generosity of time. But nonetheless, I just want to say how pleased we are, the NCSE, to be here, get your views, and every single view we want to ensure that it is reflected in some way in this document that we're putting together for cabinet. So I just stand by, and my ears are as sharp as they can be to hear and understand.
Thank you, Prof, for giving us that historical context of the development of the policy. It is indeed a long time in coming. And our final opening remarks will be from Ms. Claire Bernard, the Director of the Planning Institute of Jamaica. Ms. Bernard, can you please unmute your mic?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Madam Moderator, Ms. Murray, representing the Honorable Minister, Professor Errol Morrison, Professor Kawa, Ms. Buchanan, members of the scientific community. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, let me go again, please. So thank you, Madam Moderator. Good morning to you all. I'd like to acknowledge Ms. Murray, representing the Honorable Minister, Professor Errol Morrison, Professor Kawa, Ms. Buchanan, members of the scientific community, members of the media. Good morning to you all. Allow me to extend congratulations on behalf of the Planning Institute of Jamaica and the Science, Technology and Innovation Thematic Working Group to the National Council on Science and Technology and the Ministry of Energy, of Science, Energy and Technology on bringing the National Science and Technology and Innovation Policy Green Paper for public consultation and review. This updated policy has been in the works for some time, but we are particularly pleased that the time and the effort taken to produce it have resulted in a draft policy, which to us at the PIOJ is consistent with the thrust, ethos, and guiding principles of Vision 2030 Jamaica. Some of you might wonder why I said that the policy has been in the works for some time, and Professor Morrison really spoke about an even longer time than I recall. But I make this point recalling, I don't know, Prof, if you remember, a December 2014 courtesy call paid on the Planning Institute of Jamaica by yourself and your team after the NCST was reorganized. The conversation was very frank, but it was hopeful, and the two teams were at idem on the urgent need to modernize the science, technology, and innovation framework to create an enabling environment for STI driven growth and development in Jamaica. Importantly, that aspiration was already embedded within Vision 2030 Jamaica with a commitment to, and I quote, deepen the application of science and technology to benefit all aspects of national development and unleash the full potential of our people. Therefore, after that meeting, the process of getting the new policy started in earnest. And again, I'm following and mentioning the same things you mentioned, Prof. In January 2015, the Vision 2030 STI thematic working group was broadened and relaunched, and they had the explicit mandate to drive the STI policy reform process. They had the mandate to facilitate preparation of the STI policy and appropriate STI indicators. And those were also identified as priorities in the new 2015-2018 medium-term socioeconomic framework. And thereafter, the group also, along with other members of the scientific community, embarked on a series of activities to address the dearth of current data and information and other challenges that were identified. And Prof. Kawa, you can associate with that because you were really stressing to us the importance of having current data. Well, so much for the history, ladies and gentlemen. In many areas of life, Jamaica is a powerhouse with an outsized impact on the world. We have punched above our weight and have received international admiration and acclaim. In the STI field, we have had our halcyon days, and the Green Paper shares examples of these in the section on historical profile of STI in Jamaica. However, the situation analysis indicates that despite some achievements in STI, the country continues to grapple with challenges that affect its ability to fully utilize its resources to foster sustainable development. The PIOJ would like us to reclaim our renown in STI. We want all Jamaicans to experience the tangible benefits to be derived from cutting edge research, strategic adoption of technologies, and certainly capitalizing on our creative energies as a people so that we can generate innovations with profound societal impacts. As we review the Green Paper as presented, we at the PIOJ encourage everyone in this workshop consultation to critically assess whether the policy as drafted is leading us closer to the benefits to which we aspire. We ask you, as you look at the document, to ask yourself, is it bold enough? Is it innovative and creative enough? Is it fit for purpose? That is from a perspective of being systematic, comprehensive, and forward looking. Will it aid in addressing current and emerging societal and sustainability challenges such as poverty, food insecurity, and climate change? Thus, we invite you to examine every element, the goal, objectives, strategies, and key implementation actions. And we ask you to do that with an eye to development and the sustainable prosperity aspired to and defend in Vision 2030 Jamaica. We ask that you satisfy yourself as to whether the first 3 years, as outlined in the implementation plan, advance the agenda, and to frankly share your excitement and or your recommendations for change. And if you subscribe to the view that what is measured is what gets done, then we ask that you pay special attention to the adequacy of the implementation and monitoring frameworks outlined and how to best align and integrate these with the M&E framework on the Vision 2030 Jamaica, the medium-term socioeconomic framework, and indeed the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. As I close, I want to share my implementation agenda for the first 3 years of the policy. Personally, I would like to see expansion of the NCST to include a dedicated foresight unit, some kind of think tank to track mega trends and mega shocks and make recommendations to the nation and to the sectors that are STI enabled responses. I'd also like to see us taking the first steps towards an innovation lab being established as a consortium among the universities to strengthen the academia industry interface and to contribute to the expansion of the innovation system. And I would certainly like to see us advance a sustainable financing mechanism for SDNI, or perhaps better capitalization of an R&D fund to finance the sector. And I would like us to revisit in earnest the work that we started some time ago to establish critical STI indicators for Jamaica. So, ladies and gentlemen, this public consultation provides a unique opportunity to have our voices be heard and to share our individual and collective visions on how STNI can shape the future we want for Jamaica. So let's hear from you. Congratulations again to the team that has worked to get the policy drafted and assiduously to the process and work assiduously follow the process to this green paper consultation. At this juncture, Professor Morrison, I ask your permission to single out and acknowledge the role played by Miss Gail Nelson, who worked in the Planning Institute of Jamaica. She is the former STI development specialist at the PIOJ, and I think those of us who have worked know of her passion and the zeal with which she contributed to this process. Again, my congratulations to the team, and let's all have a good consultation.
Thank you, Ms. Bernard, particularly for your questions on how we might go about thinking about how to review the policy. What we're going to do next is that we're going to have two short presentations. The first one is going to be by Ms. Sandra Buchanan, and it's going to outline the STNI policy development process. So how we got to this space. You've heard a little bit of preview of that from Prof and from Ms. Bernard, but that's what we're going to do next. And then after that, there will be another presentation, which actually is the policy, which will outline the key components of the policy itself. And what I'm going to ask all of you to do, all of the participants to do, is that while you're listening to these two presentations, take that opportunity to put the questions that you want to ask in the chat. So go into the chat, make sure that it has your name, not Pat Lou asking all the questions, but it has your name, and then put your questions in the chat, because it's very possible that we will not be able to answer or address all of the questions that you have in the time that we have allowed. But once they are captured in the chat, rest assured that they are going to be addressed in the process of reviewing the policy. So with that encouragement to write your questions in the chat, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Sandra Buchanan, the Principal Director responsible for policy at MSET, who is going to go over the STNI policy development process. Ms. Buchanan, please.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Ms. Joaquin Murray, representing the Minister of Science, Energy and Technology, Professor Morrison, Director General of NCST, Ms. Claire Bernard of the PIOJ, my fellow presenter, Pat Lewin, Mr. Kevin Hopkins, Rapporteur, Professor Carwell, distinguished guests here on the webinar. Good morning to you. My task this morning is to give a brief overview of the policy development process, and it will give you an idea how we got here. And the policy development process as defined by the Cabinet Office. And just to advise that the STI policy, which we are deliberating and which we are consulting on this morning, will be considered a national policy. And national policies are cross-cutting. and represent the government of Jamaica's efforts to address issues of widespread importance. The creation and implementation of national policies usually involve the efforts of multiple stakeholders, as those we have here this morning, across various portfolios and sectors. The definition of a national policy in the Jamaican context is that a national policy is simply a course of action that is taken by a government to resolve a given problem or interrelated set of problems. There is no universally accepted approach for the development of a national policy, whether it be a social policy or an economic policy. And Cabinet Office in consultation developed a process, and this was approved by Cabinet in 2005. And there are 5 steps in this policy development process, and these are outlined in the diagram here. The first step in this process is the initial concept paper. Next step would be the policy preparation and analysis. The third step would be the public consultation or green paper stage, which we are at the moment. And the next step would be a point of readiness, which we term the white paper. And then the final step would be tabling the policy document in Cabinet. I will just break down each step here so that it is clearer to those of you who are not policy persons. The initial concept paper should provide information on the nature of the problem to be addressed by the policy and what approach is being contemplated to resolve it. The paper should include any initial research or consultation, which we call the evidence on which a policy will be based. Also, there should be an action plan outlining timelines and resources for the policy's development. Clear terms of reference must be developed for this policy steering committee, which will lead the charge of the policy's development. For the second step, which is a policy preparation and analysis, the ministry should prepare a draft policy document for consideration by the responsible cabinet committee. Ministries here should ensure that the draft policy specifies accountability, responsibilities, and also points to an implementation plan. For the green paper stage, once the draft document is ready for consideration, it must be submitted to the responsible cabinet committee for endorsement as a green paper. This document will be used as the basis for meeting stakeholder groups, such as we are doing now, inside and outside of the ministry to garner feedback. And I must point out here that all consultations must be guided by the consultation code for the public sector, which sets out the standards for such activity. At the white paper stage, the draft document must be revised based on the comments we received here and in other consultation. And once the consultation process is concluded, the final document should be prepared and submitted to the responsible cabinet committee for consideration. The final step in the policy development process is secure the cabinet's approval for the policy as a white paper and tabling it in the Houses of Parliament. And as Professor Morrison and Ms. Bernard from PIOJ would have alluded to, the STNI policy did not exactly follow these policy development steps. In 2014, so since they said some things about it, I will just remind us all that the STNI policy was largely driven by the NCST, which is an agency of the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology. And for those of you who are not aware, the Prime Minister is the chair of NCST and the Minister of Science, the vice chair. There's also a board of commissioners that oversees the operation of the NCST. And one of NCST's mandate is to monitor and implement S&T policies that will drive the country's development. So in 2014, the Board of Commissioners was given this charge to develop a new policy, because the policy in existence at that time was a 1990 policy, which did not include innovation, and it had long outlasted its usefulness. So a core group of scientists was put together and they formed and developed a draft document. And thereafter, the Vision 2030 thematic group of the Planning Institute of Jamaica was co-opted to assist. This led to a working group, which was named the STNI Thematic Working Group of Vision 2030. And I just jump forward to 2018, where the Vision 2030 again facilitated a consultation forum. And this session enabled development of the draft policy as it is now, in the format which it is now. And this document was submitted to Cabinet in November 2018 to the Economic Growth and Job Creation Committee of Cabinet and subsequently Cabinet. The document is now a green paper and it's here for discussion. And as Ms. Bernard said earlier in her opening remarks, we are looking forward to some lively and robust discussion this morning and in our other consultations so that this document can be enriched and so that the document which is tabled in Parliament represents what we all want as a document for science, technology, and innovation, and that it redounds to the benefit of Jamaica. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Buchanan. Our next presentation is going to be by Patricia Lewin here in the NCST, and she is going to outline the major points of the policy. Thank you. Pat?
Morning again. Okay. All right. So much of what I'll be discussing here in terms of outlining the policy would have somewhat been covered. So I'm going to quickly run through this document. So, but let me start by saying from the Science and Technology and Innovation for Sustainable Development Caribbean Regional Policy Framework of 2007, CARICOM leaders, it was recognized that CARICOM leaders felt the need for the building of STNI capacity in the region. However, as global development race ahead in the industrialized and newly industrialized nations, it has become even more urgent for the Caribbean to adopt and implement policies for immediate and further advancement in STNI. The delay has been costly in terms of both physical infrastructure and human resource development required to support innovation systems. There therefore must be now clear policy directions backed by more substantial commitment of resources to drive the process and match the scale of the task ahead. And I believe this is somewhat a critical concept to what we are trying to establish through this policy. Ms. Bernard touched on a bit of this, so I will not stay here. The policy framework of Jamaica is actually guided by the 1990 policy, and it did not contribute to the empowerment of Jamaicans to take advantage of the technological developments that were taking place globally. Also, though, there were three critical elements you could say that the policy was successful in, which was the establishment of the National Science and Technology Commission and the National Foundation for Development of Science, as well as a call for the resourcing of STNI-based initiatives. The new science and technology policy, however, will look to be more inclusive, including that of innovation updated with a wider perspective and cross-section of the Jamaican society. And of course, importantly, aligned to Vision 2030 or national development plans. Ms. Bernard outlined a few of the S.W.O.T that's outlined here. So we have dedicated institutions for STNI. Jamaica is among the few Caribbean islands that actually have national ministries for a Ministry for Science and Technology, and we have several other agencies committed to the task of supporting science and technology in Jamaica, SRC, ISENS, and others, eGov. We have a creative society. We have high level of endemism of our natural resources and natural capital. Weaknesses, however, lie in our natural or national innovation system and the fragmentation among actors. Also, there is limited advocacy for STNI and the whole supporting how STNI is advanced and funded. There are opportunities, however, in how we integrate and utilize STNI for public good delivery. Also, there is opportunities to strengthen our R&D and the contributions to the development of R&D to ensure that it can contribute to our challenges and the local problems faced in Jamaica. We are also looking as well at opportunities to find funding. There are threats, however, related to a country that's driven, factor-driven, or weak innovation system. And of course, technology is rapidly advancing globally, and we have not begun to grapple with much of that. Succinctly, the major points that we want to bring across in the policy is there are 5 goals, and the first of which speaks to enhancing the synergies among key actors, creators of knowledge, and those that consume it, with the objectives of course, of establishing our national innovation system, as well as promote collaboration among the actors. Our second goal speaks to the behavioral aspects that underpin our cultural alignment that will strengthen the integration of STNI across various sectors, with the objectives, of course, of raising awareness, much of which is being done locally, mostly through the Scientific Research Council, and of course, increased knowledge, technology output, and innovative potential within industry. The third goal here speaks to developing a national agenda advanced by STNI, which will require greater interaction among key stakeholders. And of course, our fourth goal, and excellent research and development capability. This goal speaks to the development of a framework that will promote investment in STNI and extends the development of infrastructure support to support our efforts in building our human capacity and becoming world leaders in whatever we choose to. We have the objectives in this goal of creating a sustainable mechanism for financing R&D and innovation, as well as strengthening the established state-of-art of our STNI infrastructure, and to improve the human resource capital of STNI. And our fifth goal speaks to the policy having a responsive regulatory and policy environment, of course, to ensure that there is legislation and policy that is impactful and relevant, and of course, to comprehensively monitor Jamaica's STNI output. So in essence, there are 3 things that we would want to achieve from this policy: to increase innovation and our knowledge products, to enhance our science and technology capabilities, to enhance infrastructure and human capacity for research and development. And of course, that will be contributing to the achievement of a technology-enabled society. We have outlined key priority areas: agriculture, health, education, and training, particularly in STEM, crime and public safety, environmental conservation, the financing of STNI, and of course, tourism. And this was a demand of the cabinet subcommittee that we had to take on board in order to facilitate the further development of this policy. And the implementation priority, the high-level implementation strategy will include legislative, institutional changes, as well as a mapping of our ecosystem, in not just in innovation, but our STNI, and of course to improve our planning or financial investments in STNI, as well as develop a robust monitoring and evaluation framework. And just to point out here more clearly, we hope to achieve or to be involved in the development of the National Implementation Plan and that monitoring evaluation framework, which would be underpinned by the identification and expansion of key indicators. So not just number of publications or number of researchers, but also to collect indicators or data that will support decision making. And financing the implementation, however, and that's one of the things that we'll be discussing here, will be the implementation through investments from endowment, regular income from special taxes, contribution from private sector, existing government agency funds, through creating partnerships with different agencies to pool resources to advance our goals and objectives. And that is, as quickly as possible, in a nutshell, what the STNI policy is hoping to achieve.
So thank you, Pat, for that very speedy run through of the main points of the policy. And at this point, I'm going to hand us over to our rapporteur, Mr. Hopkins, and he is going to coordinate the most important task that we have today, which is taking of your questions and the responses to your questions. So, Mr. Hopkins, if you please.
Is
Judith, would
can you hear me? Okay, good. Thank you, Dr. Mendez. Well, the format is quite simple. Persons participating is simple. You will raise your hand and you'll identify yourself by stating your name, where you're from, which institution you work with, or which parish you're from if you are a member of the public. And also the questions and comments from the chat will also be read periodically. So Professor Emeritus Ishenkumba Kawa, he will be the main person who will facilitate the discussions. And there are several guiding questions. The first is, what areas of your sector can STI best influence or impact? What other concerns should the policy consider to ensure that Jamaica benefits from the integration of STNI? How do we create an environment that promotes a culture and the integration of STNI? What are the major challenges to the integration of STNI? How can we promote or facilitate STNI increasing use-defining solutions? What is the best approach to funding STNI locally? And what are your views on how STNI enterprise could be led and managed? So just to reiterate, you will raise your hand and you state your name, where you're from, your place of work, or if you're a member of the public, you can simply say what parish you're from and your name. So I'm going to invite Professor Kawa now to guide the discussion.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Glad to see so many colleagues to whom science and technology and innovation is pretty critical. Let me thank very much all the speakers that spoke up to this moment. They have really touched on quite important aspects of what we have come to do here. And that has made my, my speech quite irrelevant, because all the things that really need to be said at this preliminary stage have already been said. Let me just reiterate that we are here basically because we are particularly concerned about the lack of application of science, technology, innovation to the development of our country. And we want to do something about it, not to talk about it, not to write about it, but to actually do something about it, both at an individual level, at an institutional level, and certainly later on at a national level. So I want to assume that the paper has been read and certainly has been enriched by the presentations this morning, and simply go straight into hearing what you all have to say, about it. We have a time limit. The time is about by my calculation, we are ending at 12:30. That is the target, 12:30. So we have about an hour. What time I see? But what time?
We started a little late, so we have about 45 minutes, if so much.
So we really don't have much time. So I'm going to ask that persons who are asking questions or making contributions ensure that they are mindful of the time limitation and therefore really give us the meat of what they want to say. So can we, I think it will be good to follow a structure, and very helpful if Kevin, you could share your screen with the questions so that we can know exactly where we are at. I'm going to allocate about 6 minutes on each presentation, on each question. I think some of them are going to be more involved than others, but let's see. You have the first question, sorry, the first issue, basically. Kevin, you have share your screen, or who was sharing? Is it Pat who has the questions?
So
Kevin, you had the questions at the.
Okay, so let me just say that Elaine Salmon Bors, I'm sorry if I chop your name up, but she has said that I assisted with the 1990 policy and acknowledged the deficiencies outlined. However, we did indicate the need to put reps in embassy to secure relevant collaboration for our needs.
Yes, I appreciate that, but that is not the question I was asking for. The question, I'm looking for the set of 7 questions that we submitted. We are not hearing you, Pat.
Sorry, I could share
yes,
that.
Yes, please do. I would like you to share, so that we can have some structure, so that we know we have covered.
Okay, 1 second, please.
Yeah.
Let's share screen.
Yes, that particular page is probably the last one. Yes, yeah, okay, good. So at least that would look roughly as the agenda that we're gonna go through. Can we? Is there anybody with who would like to say, who would like to make a contribution on areas that they think science, technology, and innovation should put a thrust on? Anyone? We know anybody with a question? Is it Kevin? You are monitoring the persons who want to speak. I'm not seeing them on my screen. Yeah. Yes, Kevin. You need to unmute your screen. Sorry, your mic.
Okay, I was saying they can raise their hands to indicate that they would like to contribute.
Okay.
So when you raise your hand like this,
yes,
then you'll be acknowledged, and then you can speak.
Looking for the first person who wants to speak.
Okay, Prof. Kawo.
Yes.
So I know that we have these pre-prepared questions, and initially they were to, you know, if we didn't have a lot of discussion, was the inside discussions. But we do have quite a bit of questions in the chat, and we could read them to you, and we could have the panel, persons on the panel take them. So as there's interest, we would love to facilitate these questions.
Yeah, but we could do that. That is one way to do it. But I had thought that the preset questions are sufficiently broad. They are not restrictive. They're sufficiently broad that they would include all contributions. But the benefit of following them is that we would be certain we have covered what might be important, aspects of the policy.
So would we, so maybe what we could do is a bit of an alignment, because when you look at some of the questions, they would actually kind of be asking something precise to like question one, question like what area of the sector STNI best impact or influence. So Cavell, for example, is asking the question, in 2019, partnerships with NGO were established. What are the outcomes of those partnerships, and how can NGO partners partners with, you know?
We can, I think we can do that as well. Let us, because sometimes when you box people up you put people in a box here, they really they're not quite comfortable. Let the discussion flow, but that means that that somebody, probably Kevin and you, Pat, Pat, would be very instrumental in ensuring that we are properly aligned and that all aspects of the key areas of the policy have actually been covered in the discussion. So I'm going to let the discussion flow, and then we'll see, how we go about it. So there was some. You can read the questions. Let's see. Unless there's somebody in the audience who wants to speak right now. No. Read the questions, please.
Okay, so the first broad one is just to reiterate what areas of your sector, because I think a very wide cross-section of persons are here. So they typically see that too many cooks spoil the broth. But in this case, I think that a lot of feedback from diverse areas would be fruitful. So what areas of your particular sector can STI best impact or influence? So whether it's in education, whether you are a tech developer,
industry and so on,
yes, because STI impacts everything. So we'd love to hear how STI can impact or influence the sector that you're currently working in.
If I can jump in a bit, I'm sorry, Kevin, I didn't see the link to raise my hand. So,
it's okay if you light up your thing, is your mic will
raise it, Dr. Riley.
Oh, it's that reason. I know some of them have a link. There are quite a number of platforms that have a link to raise a hand, like whiteboard. The question, Prof, and it's not a question, but a suggestion, because going through the policy itself and looking at the 5 priority areas, I am of the view that we should explore widening that a bit, because when you look at agriculture, for example, the short to medium term priority in agriculture is in terms of managing pests and disease, and I think it's somewhat a bit restrictive. When you look on, if we had something a bit more broad-based, like ensuring food availability and access to foods, through the agricultural space would create a bit more opportunity. And in that way, can pretty much better guide the development of the R&D plan for agriculture. So just looking on those priorities at the onset and the limited scope highlighted may give the impression that the policy is focusing primarily in those little areas. So I would love for us to maybe take a second look at that. If that is the intention, then fine. If not, I think we just need to take a second look at that component and see how it can be broadened so persons know it's not that restrictive in a sense. And I'm talking about the points that we have highlighted under the priorities, the priority section. So that's just one of the comments that I have there, because I find the pest control, which I know is pretty much linked to some of the activities of ISENS and SRC, to be a bit restrictive for such a broad field as agriculture. And vector control and management being somewhat restricted in the larger health space, bearing in mind that the science and technology policy will also extend over into health research as far as I see it.
Okay. Thank you. I want to support Dr. Riley, because when I looked at, in particular, those areas that he raised, which was one of the reasons why I made the point in my presentation, was whether we were broad enough and so on. Because I said to myself, when I looked at agriculture, that really we should be talking about using science and technology to solve the problem of food insecurity, as we raised, the issue of things like climate resilient crops and livestock and those kinds of things. So we're making that link between solving the problems that we have and using science and technology as a solution. So the pest issue was okay, but as you said, there are far greater issues that need to be addressed when we look at the current issues in the facing the country and region, and if we were to be looking at some of the mega trends, how do we use STI to fix those? So I think we really need to look at those priority areas and the areas of focus under those. Thanks.
Yeah. And if I may again, Claire, Prof. and Pat, another suggestion we could look on, because we wouldn't be expecting to be writing a new policy every 5 or 6 or 7 years. So what we could do to expand those areas, those priority areas, is just to do an overall priority focus, and then refer to the research and development plan of the country. Because each 3 or 5 years, we could develop an R&D plan as the priorities and the focus shifts throughout our economy and society. So one of the approaches I could maybe take is just, make reference to the research and development plan, which guide those activities primarily in the short and medium term space. So you wouldn't have to look on revising the policy in another 5 or 6 years, but just the R&D plan.
Can I say?
Kawa, you're muted. Prof. Morrison?
Yeah, I'm not muted. You hear me?
Muted. Sorry. Go ahead, Prof.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to make a comment here, because the two comments are taking us back to where we were when we went to the cabinet subcommittee. Because whilst we had that broad brush, comprehensive overview, the question which was brought out by the ministers is, what are we going to do now? This is what they were really saying. We want to see priorities, not that it is at the exclusion of the broader picture, but in a short term, we want to see some immediate. And that is how we sort of embraced, in brackets, so to speak, under these main headings, the agriculture, pesticide control was one of the big things. The PM kept coming back to it over and over and over. And the fallout that carries with the inability to export and so on. So it goes down the economic chain. So that is why we sort of just use these examples of priority, but it's not to the exclusion of the broader picture. I just thought I would identify that. The same thing with it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that point is well made. I'm unmuted. Yes, I think we are not going to be able to make come up with specific plans, specific activities or whatever. But the showing in general that we must pay attention to a particular area. And illustrate, give you some examples of what we could look at, to me would seem to be sufficient, at this stage, except, but the other point that has been raised by all the three contributions we have had is really that how are we going to articulate the efforts that are already in place at the Ministry of Agriculture, for example, at the Ministry of Health, for example. In other words, all these thematic areas, they already have some kind of research, some kind of activity that needs to be incorporated in this broader perspective, that we are painting. So I would want us to think through that one as well, that issue of coordination.
Good morning, everyone. I've been
Named, yes,
and I've been patiently waiting. So I don't know if I can, if the chair will allow me to speak.
You can speak.
Oh, thank you so much, Professor Ishin Kumba. Good morning again to everyone. All right, so I just want to speak regarding the first question that was raised. Noting a study called STI, Science, Technology and Innovation in the 21st Century Context. This was written by John Marburger III. Now, basically, it's somewhat of a statistical analysis, but it shows how science, technology, and innovation rather, are interconnected. And in interconnected, it's linked to all the sectors. So we're looking at education, we're looking at crime prevention, we're looking at agriculture, as was said. As relates to my perspective, now speaking on the sector on the youth demography that I represent here, I just want to highlight the importance of, and we have seen this during COVID-19, of the need for science and technology in the education sector. And it's not so much of just using science and technology to facilitate learning, but empowering young minds to be innovators in the sector. It brings forward certain areas of deficits as it relates to the capacity of persons who facilitate learning and their ability to impart science and technology when there might be a gap in their capacity to deliver these forms of education. So I'm hopeful that you understood what I'm saying with that point, in that science and technology is growing it's ever evolving, and the capacity of a facilitator or a teacher, whether it is primary or secondary, would require consistent training to facilitate the education, the using of these means to facilitate the learning, and also empowerment to enable youth or students' capacity to be agents of change or entrepreneurs in this sector. Okay. The last area that I want to, I'll be very quick. The last one is on the importance of stimulating science, technology, and innovation in the culture and creative sector. And we can note Australia's advancement in this area. And also we can note the Arab Emirates thrust to, bolster their economy by diversifying it, to moving towards more so away from oil to culture and creativity, more so using science and technology to facilitate it. Okay. So two things, education, and the culture and creative industries.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think the capacity, the education, you could even broaden it to overall capacity building. what I heard you saying is the creation of a dynamic, not static, a dynamic capacity building program should be embedded in the policy implementation. And of course, the extension to catch and so on, that is quite noted. Thank you very much. Somebody
Thank you,
else would
Prof.
like to speak? Jerome Palmer, yes? Jerome, unmute your mic and proceed.
Asking that your points, your question be as succinct as possible so that we can have more participation from everyone, please.
Right.
Please go ahead.
Jerome Palmer, you are not, okay,
Prof,
good.
I would have raised my question already. I just changed my name, so I do apologize for that. I was one that just
okay, somebody else. Anybody else? Colleagues,
do you want to read the questions that are being asked?
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay, so we have, and I'll take it from the top. Paul Brown, access. How will the policy enable all Jamaicans or the average Jamaican in rural community to be able to access STNI to advance their life? And two, I don't know if you want to take all four of them. The second one is, how can application of artificial intelligence in disease mapping, planning be integrated into policy? This came up for discussion internationally in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And thirdly, in terms of STEM education, there are issues in education training of teachers. We need teachers who are students of science and not just transmitters of scientific concepts. Major issues in equipping of labs at primary and secondary level. And fourthly, how will we address the retention of STEM teachers?
Yeah. Go ahead. Yes, thank you, Pat. Professor, I believe it's Professor Brown. These are very interesting questions. I think some of them are we can group under capacity, dynamic capacity, building that should be embedded within the policy implementation. The first question really is at the center of what the policy seeks to do, which is to entrench science, technology, and innovation in all areas, in all areas of national life. So that is the goal. The question is, how would we achieve that? Members of the designated panel, could you just reassure our colleague that is. I know that is the focus. That is going to be question number one when the when the implementation body sits. How are we going to do this? But if there are any ideas on that people might want to put up as how this can be done, perhaps that would be helpful. If not, we cannot. That is an important question, and then we will continue thinking, about it as we develop along this policy line. Prof. Morrison, you look like you have a thought.
I was going to just comment on the education aspect and the STEM, because I don't know if we at this point want to elaborate the modus operandi of implementation as opposed to putting the broad picture as to where we want to put the emphasis. And this matter of STEM education has come up, and the matter of how we do it, as well as we train the teachers of STEM. And these are the points being brought out in those questions as well. But they are certainly on the table, and the mechanism of how we go about it. We have already been doing some initial, outreaches, working with the Ministry of Education, the SRC, science teachers groups, and so on. And there is a plan for implementation.
Yes.
But Chair, I'm not too sure that you want to get the details of that.
No, not at all. Mm-hmm.
But we certainly have it on board.
Mm-hmm.
But
yes,
Chair,
yes, Paul, are you
Right. If I could, thanks for having me. I don't think it's so much the details and the nitty-gritty that we want, but to be satisfied that these things are on board. So, and one of the failings of many of these policies is that there is information about the intention, but the access part of it is where I was going. So how will persons actually be able to access it? And so one of the challenges that we have had, for example, in remote learning distance, is that we realize that many students don't have access to platforms to actually do basic learning. And this is true, in many of the rural communities. So there is the intention, but the access is not there. So it is from that standpoint, from somebody who is looking on how will you have equal access to whatever is on offer to advance your life? And that is where it is going.
Thank you for the elaboration. I think that is something that we have taken on board. That issue of the issue of access to the funding, to the facilities, to specialize the facilities, shared facilities like big pieces of equipment, and and so on and so forth. So access in a broad sense is going to be an important aspect of the implementation process, which I believe is where Professor Morrison was headed as well. So your point is access, ensure there is access to facilities, to funding, to and so on. Thanks. Any other another point?
Do you need another question?
I know. Yes, we can read another question if there is. Yes.
Susan Davis said that there is in the goal 2 mention of entrenching a culture of S&T across all sectors. However, there should be wider net of stakeholders to capture entities that hold traditional knowledge. Example, medicinal plants database at the Institute of Jamaica in the Natural History Museum. IOJ not in list of stakeholders.
I think that is an important point of indigenous knowledge. It's something that we certainly would want to tackle, and in fact, the NCST and the ministry are already doing that through a collaboration with South Africa, which I think is a productive one. It's both productive and instructive, but it could also be it could also help us to beef up our high-tech exports. We haven't spoken about that yet. Our high technology exports are really few, and the value is really very low. As a percentage of the of our manufactured exports, Jamaica's high-tech exports are less than 0.4%. Which is, very, very, very low indeed. We are talking about things like pharmaceuticals, medicines, ammunition, computers, and things like those, which require a high level of research and development. Those areas have not been, we haven't paid much attention to that. And perhaps this, if we bring in indigenous knowledge and market it and so on, that could be a contribution to to that broader aspect as well.
Prof.
Yes.
Just to expand, just to expand on that and contribute, I had a question here about us making sure that the policy in a deliberate way ensures the participation of underserved communities where innovation may occur, and these sometimes are outside of the formal systems that have been identified, but need to be captured, since the spirit of the policy speaks to a culture of science, technology, and innovation. We know in a number of cases, these don't always happen in the halls of the formal learning institutions.
Okay, so we should have broad-based mechanisms of gathering knowledge that can be translated into products, etc., building on what our people already know or can do. I think
Yes.
that's an important point. I saw a hand somewhere. Yes, Claire.
Thanks, Prof. So I'm sorry to take you back to the question of access, but I'm just thinking that perhaps if we revisited the guiding principles, we could perhaps adjust the principle 4, which talks about equity, and perhaps talk about equity and equality, and build in that the issue of access as well. And if we have it in the guiding principle, or perhaps include a guiding principle on inclusion, and if we do an inclusion principle, then we could talk about people across all types of communities, etc., having access to whatever it is that science and technology and innovation provides for the country. But I think unless we define that inclusion in the guiding principle, and then it can cascade throughout the policy, that is perhaps the best way to ensure that access, whether it's access to resources or access to opportunities, etc., is to be managed. It's best addressed.
Thank you. Yes, I think that is access is going to be an issue, definitely. But you are in government, so you know. But I'm worried a little bit because with the little money that we are going to get, we are going to have to focus. We're not going to get enough money to spread around, at least not now. We are going to have to really be hard-nosed in terms of saying we are going to put our investment in this area because we think that we can get a return, etc., etc. Not because other areas are not important, but when we look at the possibility of an immediate return, certain areas are going to receive priority. So I think that yes, the implementers will be well guided to balance the issue of access and prioritization. Those two are going to go together, I think.
Prof. Kawa, we have, I see 1 and 2 persons have their mic muted, Shannon Dawes, Susan Davis, but I also see Dr. Ivy's hand being raised.
Okay.
I could take Dr. Ivy's hand. And just to mention that the panel, not just the panel, but also the attendees are able to speak.
To answer, yeah, yes, good.
Okay.
So, did you have an order in which they came, or I could just call on them?
I would go with Paul Ivy. Anybody?
Paul Ivy. Let's start with you.
Yes, thank you, Prof. I just want to make 2 brief comments regarding funding. I've seen some proposals set out with respect to funding, and I want to suggest that some areas where possible funding could be gotten and should be included here is that here in Jamaica, we have some special funds, the Universal Access Fund, for example, the Tourism Enhancement Fund. I think those special funds, at the very minimum, a portion of them should be allocated for research in the areas that those funds are for. So for example, the Tourism Enhancement Fund, there should be a set aside for research related to the tourism sector from the TEF, because significant resources are in those areas, in those special funds. The other issue of funding having to do with, I've seen elsewhere where it said that re-scope the NCST, and I'm wondering if we're going to consider rescoping the NCST so that it becomes a body that is able to fund research on a competitive basis. In other jurisdictions, you have, like a National Science Foundation in South Africa, their National Research Fund, and so forth, so that we could have the NCST functioning in a similar manner. And there are calls for proposals in the priority areas that have been identified and so forth. So I'm thinking and suggesting that the rescoping of the NCST should be along the lines of having it functioning as a national research funding body with respect to how it operates. The issue of funding there in relation to the NCST. The other quick point I want to make is in relation to monitoring and evaluation and the question of the indicators. It is mentioned here that the three main indicators, the publications and the patents and the e-readiness index, in relation to the number of patents lodged, that is patent applications. I know that this is an international index of looking at patent applications, but I want to suggest that in our jurisdiction here, we should think a little bit further and speak about patent utilization rates, because sometimes you have these applications are made and patents are granted and they are regarded as trophies. Oh, I have a patent application. But to what extent are they utilized? So I think patent utilization rates in terms of whether they have been licensed, have they been commercialized, business have spun off from them and so forth. So the patent utilization should be an indicator. And so I want to make these suggestions.
Okay, good. I am sure other people would want to contribute to that, but I just wanted to point out, that what you're saying, we could add that the policy should facilitate the development of patents and their utilization,
Yes.
And that captures it quite nicely. And the issue of the NCST is a very broad one, and I'm glad that you brought it up because I would like really us to spend maybe a minute or so looking at it, because what you are talking about there is the issue of the leadership and management of the science, technology, and innovation portfolio or sector, or however you want to call it. But science, technology, and innovation, it has to be managed, it has to be led. Okay, so we have a policy, certainly, which is going to be, once promulgated, it will be good. But you are saying that there must be an entity that organizes the business of funding, collects money and allocates money, and does monitoring and evaluation. And I'm sure there are other roles that it can do. But what you're talking about is a well-organized, constituted body that is responsible for doing these things. Now, it might be the NCST, or the government might have other ideas, but what we are saying is there has to be a body, and NCST is the body that we are seeing now. So you mentioned it, but I'm not sure that we could pin it down that way. The government people could lead us. Could help us, yes. But
remember, one of the things that we will have to do is to conduct a mapping of the national innovation ecosystem.
Yeah.
And it could very well mean that all the bodies that Dr. Ivy mentioned about having funds, we could look at how that could contribute towards the development of the ecosystem. So,
right.
So we don't, when we're talking about the rationalization or the redevelopment of an NCST, we also have to look at what is there. And I think that's why critical to our implementation would be, as a start, that national mapping.
Yeah, definitely. But I think we can take the point that Dr. Ivy said, which is that there should be funding. And the funding, and that is actually embedded in the current draft, which seeks to, as you pointed out in one of your slides, we are seeking to move that from the current 0.0 something % of GDP to about 1% in over the next 10 years or so. And so the contribution from the public now seems to be affirming that is an important goal, and that funds should be, sources of funds should be vigorously pursued in order to make that happen. That is what I'm reading from your intervention, sir.
Yes, Prof. Just a quick brief follow-up, just to say that all funding models that exist elsewhere should inform what we do here. I'm not talking about a one-size-fits-all, but other jurisdictions have arranged funding for their S&T in relation to their national innovation system. And so those models can inform what we do.
Certainly. I mean, there are countries, for example, which have said, look, if you are a multinational company and you want to invest in our country, 1% of the size of the project goes to the Science, Technology, and Innovation Fund. You know, some countries have done that. Some countries have said we're going to put up a little tax, sales tax, and so on and so forth. So there are quite a number of funding sources that we could pursue. But the emphasis that we are making to the government, I think at this time, is to say, look, there has to be a firm commitment to fund the organization. And all areas, all potential areas of funding should be, should be explored, right? And we can give examples,
yes.
you know. Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Dr. Wallace.
I'm
Yes.
Kerry Wallace, Executive Director of the Tourism Enhancement Fund.
Yes.
As we're on that topic, we just as we love to see innovation and technological advancement, I would want to guide you in terms of how, as an agency, we look at funding projects, and the emphasis is on projects. So we tend to stay away from routine operational funding support, meaning annual amounts that we would fund any one project or any one program. What we do is we look at project applications on a specific start and end and objectives and deliverables, and we would then look to provide funding support as long as that project is in keeping with our mandate. And so what I'm saying is, if you convince our board that it has a strong tourism component, would enhance Jamaica's tourism, which is what our mandate is, then we could look at funding from a project standpoint as they come in, and not as an operation to sorry, I just wanted to make that clear, so that there's not a reliance on us for operational support, salaries, and those things.
No. I think what we are, if I may clarify a little, your point is taken. I think what we are looking at is the possibility for the Tourism Enhancement Fund to look at the integration of science, technology, innovation in enhancing the tourism product, its the environment, and other creative ways of increasing the impact of tourism on the Jamaican economy.
Correct. And we're on board with that, so much so that we even have a department in the Tourism Enhancement Fund that's in charge of research and risk.
And that is as a continuing commitment to finding new ways of enhancing the product. So
correct.
So that it's not an on-off kind of thing, which is not going to work, but rather as a sustained commitment to using some resources, of some of your resources, to enhance science, technology, innovation's contribution to tourism.
Absolutely. We believe that it's an integral part of the enhancement and development of Destination Jamaica.
Yes.
So many persons have gone online. So many habits now hinge on the use of technology.
Yes.
So we are 100% in support of being on the right side of that wave, or that transition. Not even a wave, because that suggests that it may be temporary, but that transition that we're seeing in our modern world.
Right.
So,
and the hope
we're on board
really,
where that's concerned.
Right. And the hope really is that if we can get all these areas, you know, the national, the NHT to support research and development that is in the areas of buildings, soil tectonics and things like those, you know, that would open up a huge, you know, amount of information, you know, that we could then use in the country, you know, for development. So I'm very happy that as a head of an agent of one of those agencies really has understood, you know, you are with us in terms of how we think we should move forward.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Okay, Prof, before you take another question, I just want to remind everybody of the time. It's 12:15. So yes. I'm going to ask you, Prof, if you take one more question, and then after that question, if we can hand over to the rapporteur to give us his summary, and then finally to Dr. Dushanil to close the meeting for us. So, Prof, if we just have one more question, that would be great.
Yes, Professor Giles, yes.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question has to do with a particular strategy for attracting more strong science students into becoming science teachers. We find that many of our strong science students do not have teaching as their preferred career choice. And I'm just wondering if there's a way in which we could incentivize, for example, our strong science graduates to enter the teaching profession by way of whether postgraduate diploma in teaching or other teacher training that would ensure that the people we have in the high schools are very strong science graduates.
Wonderful, yes. I think that as part of capacity building, the entity that is implementing the policy would have to look at, you know, that entire gamut of activities that need to take place from primary all the way up in order to build that capacity that you are speaking of, not only in terms of teaching and so on, but also in terms of just generating interest in people, you know, sorting out problems which are around us.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now I know Judith, Judith had given us the last question.
Just like to add something.
Very quickly, yes.
So I'd just like to add that the policy speaks to promoting science from the basic level right up to university. So it's our hope that while we promote science in all levels of education, that more people will be encouraged to actually enter the field and realize that there is potential for growth. Because Jamaica have been lacking in our response and our businesses. There's not much in the sector for people to actually work in. So now that we're promoting it and encouraging science, we're hoping that more people will becoming involved in science education as well as the different science sectors.
Sounds good. Thank you. Judy, bear with me for one thing.
Can we invite at least either Lenica or Cabell Hilton to, you know, maybe expand a little bit on their questions that they raised earlier?
Yeah, and where are they? Who are they associated with?
So they raised some questions in the very early and they haven't had a chance to answer.
Okay, all right. Can we do? There are two of them.
Asking you to facilitate them right now.
Okay, quickly. Those colleagues who I mentioned.
Lenica or Cabell.
Cabell is from Red Stripe. That's the Red Stripe lady.
I'm not sure.
Okay, while they are organizing themselves, there's one thing I wanted to point out. A very huge gap, and I think Claire really touched on it at the beginning. There is a big gap between what science and technology is doing versus what industry needs, right? A huge gap. That gap has been in existence. If you read documents about science, technology, and innovation in Jamaica, you're gonna find all the way up to as far back as you can go. It has been a stubborn gap to bridge. What is happening in the labs, what's happening in science and technology, and what is actually needed in industry. And the two are not talking to each other. And we are emphasizing in the policy that the two must talk if for this policy to succeed. But I would have wanted to hear some views from people who are in the industrial, in the private sector area.
Cabell Hilton is ready to speak.
Good, man. Good. Go ahead. Hilton.
Hello, Cabell.
Well, anybody else? While we...
Cabell need to unmute her mic. I think that's it.
Cabell dropped off, I believe.
Oh, she did.
Dropped off, yeah. But is there somebody who has any some ideas that we need to look at? How are we going to bridge this gap between R&D and industrial needs, or economic needs, which is, we had just started talking about that a little bit with Dr. Wallace, but one could probably expand beyond that, because with Dr. Wallace, we are saying, look, collaboration between R&D institutions and your organization could actually enhance tourism. Fundamentally, that's what we are saying. And I'm so happy that he agrees, and we are all on one page on that. But that needs to be broadened a little bit to other industries. Anybody else with some?
Prof?
Yeah.
I'm going to be very quick. Thanks for allowing me to speak.
Dr. Ricardo Anderson, is that you? No, not you.
It's Jerome.
Jerome, yes. Go ahead.
Is it possible to ensure that some sort of campaign is led to stimulate awareness and public demand for science and technology as it relates to their reception, and have them participate in the process? That's a question.
Yes, I think that that's Dr. Her name is the lady who in blue who spoke about the publicity of science, technology, innovation. I think that is part of what you are referring to as well. I'm sorry. Oh, Cheniel, Dr. Cheniel.
Can you ask him to repeat his question, please?
Thanks, Doctor. I can. I'm just saying, is it possible, or would the policy consider including public awareness on basically demanding the utilization of science and technology, and also their capacity to develop these technologies, so their use and also their development in
recognize that popularization is one of the 6 priority areas in the policy, and as such, because popularization is a priority area, that we hope that the things that you are alluding to would be covered under that priority area of the policy.
Thanks, Dr. Judy.
Good. Pardon?
Prof, on the question you asked about getting that gap between what is being researched and what businesses are doing, maybe if we...
Okay, you muted unmute your mic, please.
Sorry. I'm thinking on the question you asked about how we bridge that gap between industry and what is being done in the lab.
Yeah.
Maybe if we consider incentivizing R&D spending in corporate entities, maybe the government could incentivize maybe through tax breaks based on R&D spending, which then could lead to private-public partnerships for developing solutions, because unfortunately we do have a culture of companies coming to the experts here with intractable problems to help develop solutions, and maybe it has to do with their ability to fund.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so good. I think that's an important point. Incentivize industry to spend, to invest, basically, to invest in research and development. That's an important point. Judith is not going to hire me to facilitate any meetings anymore. After 10 minutes. But I think we have covered everything. I don't see anybody who is dying to. I'm not seeing anybody who is dying to speak. Dr. Hilton, we had given you a chance a little earlier, but we could not find you. And I'm kind of nervous there at this point, unless there is room in the program. We're gonna have 5 minutes to hear from Kevin and wrap up. But,
I mean, what I could,
yeah. Can we okay, Dr. Hilton, you have a minute or so?
Please, let's have Cavell give us a last question. Then I'm going to ask, I might just then ask Shanil if she could close the meeting, and sorry, Kevin, we will try to remember what the summary was. Please, Cavell, unmute your mic and give us your question.
Okay, so my question was, how can we incentivize foreign investors so we can get outside funding?
Okay, good. So what you are suggesting is that when people come to invest in our country, they should contribute to R&D.
Yes.
So we can take that. We can take that on board. That was quick indeed.
Okay.
Okay. So thanks a lot. Can we? Would you like to capture a couple of things from Kevin in these 3 minutes that we have?
I would really like Shanil to tell us the next steps.
Shanil, okay.
Yeah, so
okay.
Sorry, Kevin, we're going to ask Shanil to tell us what we do now.
Okay, all right.
Where we go from here. Thank you.
So facilitator Professor Kawa, distinguished speakers from NCST, Professor Morrison, Dr. Mendez, Miss Lewin, Miss Buchanan from the Ministry of Science, Education and Technology, Miss Bernard, our guest from the Planning Institute of Jamaica, our rapporteur of the evening, Mr. Hopkins, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, a good day to you all. So science, technology, and innovation are powerful determinants of the conditions of modern life, a necessary element of human progress. Technology problems now inspire important areas of science and technology to broaden the scope and capabilities of technology. So it's with this in mind that our immediate next step following this public consultations will be to include any amendments from our draft STNI policy based on the feedback that we have gotten from the public and other consultative process and our key stakeholders. So these amendments will be made. Then after which the STNI policy final document will be submitted to Cabinet for their approval as a white paper before it is tabled in the Houses of Parliament. And ultimately, the STNI policy promotion using the implementation plan will ensue so that Jamaicans in all sectors can benefit. So as we draw to a close, to close the end of the first session of a 2-day virtual public consultation on the National Science, Technology and Innovation Green Paper, I am pleased with the substantive deliberations and discussions that have taken place on this platform. Science, technology, and innovation are critical to the achievement of the Vision 2030, and the level of participation, commitment, and involvement demonstrates the significance of science, technology, and innovation in Jamaica. This first session of our virtual public consultation is a milestone event as we embarked on a journey towards the implementation of this STNI policy. Our objective was to ensure that we harness the public's opinion on Jamaica's science, technology and innovation policy so as to ensure the policy fulfill the need of Jamaicans. I believe the discussion and outcomes have set us on the right path. This approach will ensure that Jamaica's national science, technology, and innovation policies are inclusive and designed to leave no one behind. STNI is transforming our society on a daily basis. We must be ready to utilize them to solve our development challenges and enable our societies to prosper. Science, technology, innovation can be the engine of future growth and a driver of regional cooperation. We must work together and share our experiences, best practices, and lessons learned if we are to meet the Vision 2030 Jamaica. Let me reiterate Minister Flavor Williams' sentiments in her recent sectoral presentation. Imagine a new Jamaica where science is embraced by all, innovation is unlocked in all Jamaicans, and technology is at its best in all sectors. We must imagine and achieve a new Jamaica. I thank you all for participating in this virtual consultation and look forward to the outcomes being implemented and successful future sessions. I wish you all a safe and productive day. So please spare me only 40 seconds more and watch this video. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanil. That was a great way to end our meeting today. Thank you all very, very much for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Keep safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
All the best.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
I just going to call Ishen to share some ideas based on the comments that we heard. You know, he's gone already.
Yes.
But we have to close off the webinar, no?
Yes, bro.
Okay. So I'm going to give him a call on the cell and have a chat.